of Christmas than probably what people have seen before.
One day I was sitting in my office and one of our publishers called me. He was a friend of mine. He said, "Hey, we're thinking about doing this book on Christmas, and what we want to do is take the key elements of Christmas and put them into short little chapters. We need 25 chapters, and we need them in 3 weeks." And I thought, you got to be kidding me. But if you really get started and you believe in something, the good news was I'd preached on almost all of those. So it wasn't like going to research new material. It was taking things I'd already studied and finding ways to abridge them and put them in a chapter so that they would fit into this category. So we did 25 Why the Nativity chapters, and we made the deadline. It was amazing. For me as a pastor, I think Christmas is special because the message of the birth of Christ is the seed of the gospel. It's the good news. Easter is fraught with the death of Christ, which is by itself is sad. The resurrection makes it glorious. But Christmas is totally positive in terms of the birth of a child, the coming of the Redeemer, people gathering from every walk of life to observe the angels, the shepherds. There isn't a better story that you could ever tell.
To film a historical piece, you have to go someplace that looks like the time. So going back to the first century, and with the sets and the costumes and all that takes to film a first century piece, the scope got quite big, quite fast. But we knew that if we were going to do something that was memorable, we had to over 1,500 people for this show in different areas of Southern California. We have had over 103 named characters on set. We have had background anywhere from 3 to 75, 80 in any given day. It has been a lot of different people on this backlot and in our locations, putting this whole piece together so it looks believable and it looks authentic.
Production's been super cool on this job. We've been able to get cranes, sliders, Steadicam full-time. We have dolly full-time. It's pretty amazing. Multiple cameras, 2 cameras for the whole run of the show. We had a 3rd camera for about 3 weeks of the show. So it's been put together really great. We're just kind of rocking. You can do a lot when you have all the tools and the personnel that know how to use the tools. And that's what Turning Point Studios has basically provided to make this film. Here's the thing, with locations, there's different variables. You get to a location, it might be beautiful, but here are the factors. How hard is it to get equipment in there? And that kind of tells you right there, what are you actually going to use for this? You may not be able to get a dolly in there, so maybe a Steadicam, or maybe it's just sticks and a slider. And then you got to also factor in time of day, because if you can't really light it up, hopefully that sun's going to be backlight for you. And then after that, we got very Western. We ended up in Thousand Oaks, up in the hills, and that was beautiful up there. A couple difficult spots, again, just how do you get equipment into the location? That was always an issue there. Not a major one, but it kind of simplified things. But at the same time, we got some really beautiful stuff just because of that. For example, I wanted to bring a dolly down to this one location. And after scouting it the second time with the key grip, I looked at him and said, nah, this isn't going to happen. Anyhow, one of my camera operators went handheld in there, and we got some beautiful stuff. Not planning on doing it that way, but we just did it, and it looked great.
There are many Christmas shows out there. So one of the questions we first had to ask ourselves, if we do a Christmas show, a Christmas film, why do another one? It's a familiar story. Everyone knows the plot line. Everyone knows what's going to happen in the end. So why do one? And that was a huge question we had to answer. We felt that we could put a little more creativity in the story. We could put a little bit more imagination into a story that's pretty down pat. I mean, not only do you see the story on television every year, but you see it at your church or in a Christmas play downtown, and it's the same cast of 9 characters. We felt like we could add a lot more to the story, drop in a little bit of imagination, make it a little more provocative in the storyline so people would take a new look at Christmas. And that was the goal, was to say, let's take a look at Christmas again and not just present the same story, but a story that makes you stop and think a little broader about what it was to have Jesus born in Bethlehem. The very first thing that you see in our show is the Romans, is the decree. And the Romans continually are there throughout the show to show you there's a tension there's a little bit of our antagonists that show that they're there, they're watching, they're concerned. And it also is a little bit of setting the stage for what will happen 33 years later when Jesus is crucified. It's always a presence in their life. We think that the Romans showed up when Jesus was crucified. They were present in his life from the time he was born to the time he died. They were always around. They were always there, just looming, waiting to take advantage. So I think that is very important for us to show that there is always trouble. There's always unrest. There's always something that we should be concerned about. But when the angel told the shepherds that he would bring peace on earth, he would be the Prince of Peace. So I think that's what we want to do with that tension of the Romans always being around, always watching, and realizing that we are to rise above that. There's one scene when Jesus walks through the town and he doesn't acknowledge the Romans because it doesn't bother him. It bothers everyone else, but not him because he's overcome all of that. So in creating a creative package to house Mary and Joseph and the shepherds and the kings, we decided to put in characters that, though we don't know them by name, we know that people like these characters would be there. So we have children, we have the kings and families, we have neighbors. We even see characters that we'll actually get to know in Jesus' life as kids early. The idea of nuanced characters came to make people stop and think again that this is not a story that's they already know, but maybe this is a story they should think of, to take a second look at. Anytime you have a nuance, that means it's something a little different than what is already planned or stated. And I think a lot of storytelling is adding specific nuances to a story that make you stop and think, I never thought about that. That's possibly the way it went. What would I do in that situation? So our nuanced characters were created to drop in those moments. So you wouldn't just say, oh yeah, Mary and Joseph. Oh yeah, the baby, the shepherds. But to stop and experience Christmas yourself for the first time through the eyes and lives of these nuanced characters. But we also added a lot of nuanced moments that are foreshadowing of what Jesus would have in his life. I can think of a few, like when Mary first comes to Bethlehem, she's sitting at the well waiting for her husband to find a place for them to stay, and as she's sitting there observing the whole town, she notices a blacksmith who's really tough and mean and angry. And in our story, he represents the people who are not welcoming, and he's sitting there in his blacksmith shop working, and what he's doing is making nails, and they're not small nails, they're large nails, and as he's making them, he's tossing them and throwing them to the ground. And he looks up at Mary and she looks back at him, and he throws his last nail, which is the third nail. And so in that moment, it's a nuanced moment that we don't know there's a blacksmith that had an encounter with Mary in the square, but we put that in because when she sees those three nails on the ground, it's a little foreshadowing of things that are going to come in the life of her son. There are sprinkled throughout the show, there are a lot of nuanced moments of symbols and a white horse, flowers, swaddling clothes that are all premonitions of what will happen in the future life of Jesus. Sometimes when you tell a story, the flashing forward or flashing back really helps set the details. And it also makes a story go from just one facet to many faceted aspects of the story. So in Why the Nativity, I decided to drop in foreshadowing of Jesus' life from the baby to seeing himself years later. There's some characters that we see in this show that end up later in Jesus' life, as I mentioned. But the dream sequences and the foreshadowing of things to come in a dream or a vision happen a lot to tie the larger gospel story in of Jesus as a baby. But wouldn't it be nice to understand why Jesus was born? So in that manger scene, we see Jesus have a flash forward of what his life will be, and we see the work of Jesus in healing the sick and welcoming the children and forgiving a woman and even dying on the cross. We don't want to miss that part of why the baby came. So those were put in to say, just a reminder, it's not just about this moment, it's about the start of his whole life. This is the moment that starts what he's about to do. This is the beginning of his mission, not the end of his mission. There was a little bit of concern that we would overshadow the true story, and we have tried not to do that. We've also tried to make all these characters accurate to the time and not add anything that is far beyond, what we could expect. One of the newest characters that was a stretch for me before we researched them was all the different kings and their family. We found out through research and history that kings would never travel by themselves, especially if it's a 2-year, 3-year journey, because they'd be robbed. They would want their families with them. So in this research, we found out that people did take their families, and people did take guards with them. They were in it for a long trip. So in our show, though you've probably never seen kings show up with their whole families, you'll see that in ours. So it's a stretch of what you've seen before, but historically, it's actually probably what truly happened when people would travel. They would take their life and travel with it.
Probably the most fascinating aspect of the direction that we received was for the 3 wise men, the kings from the East. That to me was incredibly exciting to research. As a costume designer, we're always concerned with historical accuracy. Now, because of the time period, there are very few visual references that we could actually go off. So, of course, we looked at the various empires that existed, and we're talking about anywhere from, 2nd, 1st century BC all the way to 1st, 2nd century AD. But we looked into the Roman Empire as well as the Persian Empire, some of the ancient dynasties of China. And because the director of the project wanted the 3 kings to be represented in a little bit different way, he was interested in looking into one of the kings to be from China, and we specifically looked into the Han Dynasty, which is an ancient historical period of Chinese history. So there were quite a bit of information, actually. I was surprised myself of how many visual references we had from the period. Also, what was special is that we were not only seeing the kings, the 3 kings, but we also saw their families. And so for each king, we have actually a royal entourage. And the entourage included the king, the wife, the children of the king, as well as servants, guardsmen, horsemen, cameleers, really a big group of people. And we see them in 3 various scenes. We see them in their own homes, when they travel, and also at the end at Bethlehem, when they meet the child Jesus. And so that was really a big portion of the research that we did, is to research into the 3 kings. So in addition to the Chinese king from the Han Dynasty, we also looked at, there's a character that is named King Rashan, and he's from the Persian Empire. So we definitely looked at historical research from the Persian Empire. And then the 3rd king is King Kamari, who comes to us from Africa, and actually more specifically from Central Africa, the Serengeti region. It's essentially, it kind of covers present day Kenya, a little bit of Ethiopia, Congo. So that was really fascinating to look into ancient cultures from that continent as well.
So there's a point in the story where 3 kings from different geographical locations, from Asia, the Middle East, Africa, we're using instrumentation for each of these groups and their entourage. But when they actually journey to Bethlehem, I've written a theme that is sort of a combination of all 3 of these locations. So it's kind of a unifying theme, and I've used all the instruments melded them all together into sort of a melting pot. So it's not particularly one thing or the other. Most people in general, when they're watching a film, the music isn't even apparent to them. And that's probably a good thing. It's when the music is too apparent when it's probably not doing its job. It's amazing what music brings to a film when it comes to enhancing emotion. I love writing music to picture. I love the emotion it brings, the subtlety, the interesting way it bends the picture. I was attracted to this project, Why the Nativity, mostly because of the story. It's an epic story. It musically covers every style I can think of, from grandiose to magical to tender. It's a love story between Mary and Joseph, between God and his people. There's so much substance to it, and musically, it's a treat to work on because of that. When it comes to the project Why the Nativity, I think that music is super important, partly because of the docudrama format that it's in. Part of the reason why this project is so attractive to me and why I took it was I really enjoy being involved on a spiritual level as well as a musical level with the project. So my daily work is a little bit like church. It's a little sort of my way of connecting emotionally with my creator, and those themes need to be emotional. They need to have impact. They need to be strong enough to be developed throughout the show, to give the characters a sense of who they are, to give a sense of place to where we are, to give importance that it deserves, because the story deserves importance.
So in creating Why the Nativity, we really wanted to have some themes that the world today could relate to. So love, young love, mission, calling, grace. So we have some themes throughout this show. We think of Mary and Joseph as kids. In Dr. Jeremiah's writings, he brings out that Mary and Joseph were raised in the same little town of Nazareth, so they would know each other as kids. So we see them as kids running through town.
We got this crane, it's called a Chapman Zeus. It was built in the 1950s, and it's a classic. We got to talk, and we knew we wanted something out here in the back lot that could be fast to get high-angle shots. That came up. Turns out they have a Steadicam platform for it. We found that out, and then instantly it's like, hey, we should try some Steadicam walk-offs. So day one, we got the crane, and guess what? Steadicam walk-off. We sent our operator up. He did a nice walk-off right into Nazareth, following young Mary and Joseph down the street. It was pretty epic.
To be able to be here and portraying somebody who's not really talked about a lot, and so like even in the Bible, like he's in a couple of verses, right? But you know he's a huge influence on just the upbringing of Jesus, you know, and the impact he must have had just like being a carpenter and having like I don't know, just like being a father figure up close and personal in the physical world while his Father in heaven was looking down. It just feels like an honor because I know that Mary and just their journey and their story is pretty special. So to be able to play that and bring their stories to life and like show who they were as humans, as like Paul talks about their relationship and their love as they grew, and then having all this happen and seeing something that the Bible doesn't really touch on. It's our creative freedom to kind of explore culturally and historically true, but something that is really fun for the audience to dive into and be like, wow, this is what that could have looked like, and this is what that could have felt like. But also, coming from Joseph's perspective, I don't know, initially when I read the Bible, I saw him as just like, okay, yeah, I get to be a part of God's plan, you know, and I just get to dive on in and be like, wow, I got chosen for this. But like, this is his girlfriend, this is his soon-to-be wife, and then hearing that your wife is pregnant, and it's like something that you've been planning for and like going after, and you get to see now more of like his journey through that, and maturing through that and seeing how he dealt with it. And I don't know, like I've really fallen in love with his character more through that, seeing how patient he is and how kind, and also just that level of surrender of your plans to God and what he has in store.
We want them to be kids who
For your precious love, the stars spell out love longing for our union then. Love my fragrance so captivating. You close to me, I lose myself. Never thought I would find love like this. Never thought I would be waiting. Move your body, let your spirit soar, and let your atom move your body. Oh my love, mine, and oh I mine. Oh my love, mine, why did you have to? You were all I needed, yeah, yeah. I gave you my heart, my soul, my heart. or die. Swing those hips around, can't stop, roll back down. My ladies, short, tall, thin or wide, always down and ready to ride. One by one, billion by billion, been holding up half the sky. Raise your hand if you're ready and willing, if you know it's time. Time for a girl on time. Time for a girl on time. Time for a girl on time. Whether you're ready or not, time for it all. Break free of history, this train is racing straight ahead.